You keep telling yourself that wanting someone this desperately is love, but what if the very intensity of your need is proof that you are running from the one person you cannot bear to face, yourself? Friedrich Nietzsche understood that our most consuming desires often mask our deepest fears, that what we mistake for passion is frequently the abyss within us, calling out for something, anything, to fill the void we refuse to acknowledge. Every time you lose yourself in another person, every time you sacrifice your peace for their attention, every time you mistake the chaos of longing for the depth of connection, you are avoiding the confrontation that could set you free. The philosopher who declared that we must become who we are knew that most people spend their entire lives fleeing from this becoming, using others as escape routes from the terrifying journey inward. But what happens when you finally stop running and discover that the emptiness you have been trying to fill was never meant to be filled by another human being? You reach for another body thinking it will fill the hollow space inside you. But Nietzsche knew this truth long before psychology gave it a name. What you mistake for lust is often the abyss calling to itself, seeking external validation for an internal wound that refuses to heal. The very intensity of your desire reveals not strength, but the depth of your emptiness, like a starving man who devours everything yet remains perpetually hungry. Every time you chase that fleeting high, you confirm what terrifies you most, that you are insufficient unto yourself. The woman becomes not a person but a mirror, in which you desperately seek reflection of your own worth, your own vitality, your own power. Yet mirrors can only show you what you bring to them. And if you bring emptiness, emptiness is all you will see reflected back. This is why your most passionate encounters often leave you feeling more alone than before. You think you are conquering when you are actually surrendering, giving away pieces of yourself to fill a void that can only be filled from within. The abyss stares back because you have been staring into it, mistaking its darkness for the depth you lack in yourself. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power as the fundamental drive of all life, but observe how yours has been twisted into something unrecognizable. What should be creative force, the drive to overcome yourself and become more than you are, has become a desperate need to dominate others, to feel powerful. You collect conquests like a weak man collects weapons, hoping quantity will compensate. For the absence of genuine strength, true power creates, it builds, it elevates both yourself and those around you. But corrupted will to power destroys, it takes, it diminishes everyone it touches, including yourself. When you use sexuality as a weapon to prove your worth, you reveal that you have confused power with its shadow, mistaking the ability to take for the courage to give. The man who needs to conquer sexually is admitting his defeat in every other arena that matters. He has surrendered his will to create meaning, to build something lasting, to become someone worthy of respect rather than fear. Your sexual appetite becomes voracious, not because you are powerful, but because you are powerless everywhere else, seeking in the bedroom what you cannot find in your own soul. Nietzsche's eternal return forces you to confront the most uncomfortable question of all. If you had to live this exact same pattern of relationships forever, would you choose it? The same hollow encounters, the same temporary highs followed by deeper lows, the same faces changing while the emptiness remains constant. Your patterns repeat, not because fate is cruel, but because you are unconsciously drawn to what confirms your deepest beliefs about yourself. You choose the same type of woman over and over, not because she is your type, but because she reflects back the same unresolved wounds that feel familiar. The chaos feels like passion. The drama feels like depth. The intensity feels like love. But you are simply returning to the scene of your own emotional crime. Each repetition is your unconscious attempt to master what once mastered you, yet You approach it with the same tools that failed you before. The eternal return is not punishment, but revelation, showing you that your choices are not random, but part of a deeper pattern seeking resolution. Until you can look at your relationship history and say, yes, I would choose this again, knowing what I know now, you are trapped in repetition rather than living in conscious choice. The question is not whether you will repeat the pattern, but whether you will finally see it clearly enough to transform it. You have constructed an entire moral system around your sexual experiences, dividing women into categories of good and bad, pure and corrupted, worthy and unworthy. But Nietzsche understood that these moral judgments often serve to protect us from confronting our own contradictions. The woman you label as dangerous is often the one who threatens to reveal parts of yourself you have disowned, while the one you call virtuous may simply be safe enough to keep your wounds hidden. Your morality in relationships is not about ethics, but about control, creating rules that justify your fears and limitations. You condemn the woman who embodies sexual freedom because she reminds you of your own imprisoned desires, while you idealize the one who mirrors your own emotional restrictions. This moral framework becomes a prison where both you and your partners must perform roles rather than express authentic selves. Beyond good and evil lies the possibility of encountering another person without the filter of your judgments, seeing them as they are rather than as your wounds need them to be. This requires abandoning the comfort of moral categories that make you feel superior, and instead embracing the discomfort of genuine encounter. The most dangerous women are often dangerous precisely because they invite you to step beyond your carefully constructed moral boundaries and meet them in the raw territory of authentic desire. Man who has conquered himself enough to create his own values rather than inherit them from others. In sexuality, this means discovering what you actually desire versus what you think you should desire based on social programming, past wounds, or the need to prove something to yourself or others. Most men live their entire sexual lives according to scripts written by their insecurities rather than their authentic nature. Creating your own values in intimacy requires the courage to examine every belief you hold about desire, masculinity, and worth. Why do you want what you want, and whose voice is really speaking when you feel that wanting? The Übermensch asks not whether his desires are acceptable to others, but whether they emerge from his deepest truth or from his unexamined wounds. This is terrifying work because it means taking full responsibility for your choices rather than blaming biology, society, or circumstances. Authentic desire feels different from compulsive lust because it includes the whole of you, not just your neediness or your wounds. It seeks connection rather than conquest, understanding rather than validation, growth rather than repetition. When you create values from your own truth, you stop needing others to complete you and start choosing them from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. This is how the Übermensch loves, not because he needs to, but because he chooses to. From his own overflowing strength, Nietzsche declared that God is dead, and nowhere is this death more evident than in how modern men approach sexuality. When the sacred dimension of intimacy dies, what remains is mechanical pleasure-seeking devoid of deeper meaning or purpose. You find yourself going through the motions of desire without understanding why it feels so empty, like performing a ritual in a language you no longer speak or believe in. The death of God in sexuality means the collapse of any framework that connects physical intimacy to something greater than immediate gratification. Without this transcendent dimension, sex becomes consumption rather than communion, taking rather than sharing, proving rather than expressing. You chase intensity because you have lost access to depth, mistaking the loudness of sensation for the richness of meaning that your soul actually craves. This creates a profound nihilism in your intimate life where nothing matters beyond the temporary escape from your own consciousness. Each encounter becomes another attempt to fill a God-shaped hole with godless pleasure, leaving you more spiritually impoverished than before. The path forward requires not returning to old religious frameworks, but creating new sources of meaning that honor both the body and the soul, finding the sacred within the human rather than seeking the human as escape from sacred responsibility. Amor fati, love of fate, demands that you embrace not just your noble desires, but also the darker impulses you have spent years trying to deny or suppress. The parts of your sexuality that shame you, the fantasies that disturb you, the needs that make you feel weak, these are not obstacles to overcome, but aspects of yourself to integrate. Nietzsche understood that wholeness requires accepting the totality of what you are, not just the parts that fit your idealized self-image. Your shadow in sexuality contains both your repressed power and your unacknowledged vulnerability, the aggression you fear expressing and the tenderness you fear revealing. When you reject these aspects, they do not disappear but operate unconsciously, creating compulsions and attractions that seem to control you rather than serve you. The woman who triggers your shadow is often the one who can teach you most about yourself if you have the courage to look. Accepting your shadow does not mean acting on every impulse, but rather acknowledging the full spectrum of your nature, without judgment. This integration allows you to choose consciously rather than be driven unconsciously, to express your desires authentically rather than perform them compulsively. When you can love your fate, including its dark corners, you stop projecting your unaccepted parts onto others and start relating to them as whole beings rather than as repositories for your disowned aspects. Nietzsche's transvaluation of all values applies directly to how you have been taught to understand desire, masculinity, and worth in relationships. Every belief you inherited about what makes you valuable as a man, what constitutes healthy sexuality, what love should look like, these must be examined and consciously chosen rather than blindly accepted. The values that shaped your parents' generation may be poison for your soul in this moment. Most men operate from borrowed values that create internal conflict between what they think they should want and what they actually need. You perform masculinity according to outdated scripts, while your authentic self withers from lack of expression. The transvaluation requires destroying false values, not through rebellion, but through conscious examination, asking whether each belief serves your growth or limits your potential for genuine connection. Creating new values means taking responsibility for defining what authentic desire looks like for you specifically, not for men in general, or for your father, or for society's expectations. This might mean valuing emotional intimacy over sexual conquest, depth over variety, presence over performance. The danger is not in having unconventional values, but in living according to values you have never consciously chosen, letting others define what your desires should be rather than discovering what they actually are. Nietzsche's command to become who you are cannot be fulfilled in the constant company of others, especially not in the intoxicating presence of romantic partners who reflect back distorted versions of yourself. Solitude is not loneliness, but the laboratory where you discover what remains when all external validation is stripped away. Most men fear this solitude because it reveals how much of their identity depends on others' responses rather than their own authentic nature. In solitude, your desires clarify because they are no longer performing for an audience or seeking approval from another. You begin to distinguish between what you want because you actually want it and what you want because wanting it makes you feel like the kind of man you think you should be. This clarity is essential before entering intimate relationships because, without it, you will use others as mirrors to create an identity rather than expressing an identity you have already discovered. The man who has spent time alone with himself brings something substantial to relationships rather than seeking to extract something from them. He knows his own depths, his own shadows, his own gifts, and therefore does not need another person to complete him, but can choose to share his completeness. This is the foundation of authentic desire, not the desperate reaching of incompleteness, but the generous offering of fullness. Until you can be alone with yourself, without running toward distraction, you are not ready to be genuinely present with another. If you had to live this exact relationship pattern, this exact approach to desire, this exact way of being with women, for all eternity, would you choose it? Nietzsche's eternal return is not a metaphysical doctrine, but a psychological test that reveals whether you are living authentically or merely surviving. Most men, when honestly confronted with this question, realize they have been sleepwalking through their intimate lives, repeating patterns they would never consciously choose. The eternal return forces you to take full ownership of your choices, because it removes the comfort of thinking this is temporary, that you will change later, that the next relationship will be different. If this moment with this person expressing this version of yourself is eternal, does it reflect who you truly are or who you think you should be? This perspective transforms every encounter from a casual interaction into a statement of your deepest values and commitments. Living as if this moment defines eternity means bringing your full presence and authenticity to each relationship, rather than treating it as practice for some future ideal connection. You stop using people as stepping stones toward becoming yourself and start expressing yourself fully in each moment. This is how the authentic man loves, not as preparation for real love, but as the complete expression of love itself, knowing that if this moment repeated forever, he would choose it again because it reflects his truest nature rather than his compensatory needs.